Right down.
He's down. Okay.
We love these technical moments.
Well, they create excitement.
I think we're good. No, we're not.
Right is. Something's going crazy. Are we good? Somebody's got volume open somewhere.
His mic is on.
Hear you, Dave. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, good. Well, let's get started here. Hey, thanks everyone for joining us today. Welcome to this edition of Buildcast. This is 4.3. And today we're going to be talking about building your missions trip. How to give students a powerful cross-cultural experience. And by the way, as a youth pastor, that's in my heart. I want to give students an incredible experience when it comes to the things of God. I want them to experience all that He has for them. And as a youth pastor, we've got a great opportunity to do that. Hey, we got a lot of guests with us. Real quick, I just want to introduce them to you. I'm so glad to always have my co-host with me, the incomparable Lee Rogers, our lead campus pastor. How you doing today, Pastor Lee?
I am doing good. Like a lot of youth pastors, youth ministry people today, I'm feeling a little groggy. I was down in Chambersburg with Aaron Lawrence last night preaching. He's doing the God So Loves series, and I'm honored to be down there. But you know what that means, getting home late, going out afterwards, and we know all of you in youth ministry of Wednesday services are also feeling that Thursday morning burn, so thanks for being with us.
I hope it's not just a burn, but I hope, man, that today you are also enjoying something that God did supernatural last night in your sessions. We're also glad to have our missionary from Guatemala with us, Dave Amsler, and you'll be hearing from him a little bit later on. And also one of our great youth pastors, Pastor Rob Gillen, from Christian Life Assembly in Camp Hill. He's going to be joining us as a communicator today. I want to jump right into this, Lee, if I can, but you know, as I was headed to the Ministry Center today, it just so happens that I picked up a kid's bike along the way, and it has training wheels on it, and I got it out of the trash, and it's actually for an upcoming ladies event that they're going to be doing, and I also happen to be selling my car, and I got for sale signs up in the window, and so as I was coming to the Ministry Center today, I got this bike hanging at the top of the car and everything, and you may be able to see the picture of it even as I'm telling you this story here, but you know, as I'm sitting at this red light, the guy next to me winds down his window and he says, "Hey, if I buy your car, is that your ride home?" You know what? That was a funny moment there, but in many third world countries, that would not be a question. That would just be assumed. That would be a given. Yes, this would be my transportation for sure. But you know, in setting this up, when we're talking about giving students a powerful cross-cultural experience, there's a couple things I want to talk to you about. First of all is the power and the presence of God. You know what, our students, they need to experience the power and the presence of God for themselves. You know, in Acts, we see that David, he said, "I saw the Lord always before me, because He is at my right hand, I will not be shaken." You know what? That is so very, very true. He goes on in the 28th verse and he says, "You have made known to me the paths of life. You are full of joy in your presence." You know, there's a couple of places that I know that students of God. I know for me, it was a camp and a retreat experience for me. That's where I experienced for the first time the power and the presence of God. I know there's countless youth pastors and many, many more students who can go to places at the conference center and say, "This is where I experienced the power and the presence of God." Hopefully they're experiencing the power and presence of God in our youth services as well, but these are important. Another valuable place in a spiritual maturation of a student to experience the power and presence of God, I believe, is on a missions trip. You know what? According to these verses that I just read to you from Acts, there's a couple things that happen. In the 25th verse, we see that there's confidence. There's confidence that you receive while you're in the presence of God. David says, because he's at my right hand, I will not be shaken. Let me tell you, when on mission trips, there's some crazy, crazy stuff that happens that I tell you, if you do not have, if you're not spirit-filled, if you do not have the power and the presence of God in your life, you are going to be actually, you're going to be a target for sure. You're going to be a target anyway, but you're going to struggle. The second one is in that 28th verse, the presence gives us direction as well as filling our lives with joy. And I love that. You know, when we're on mission trips, we need to be led of the Spirit. We need to be led of the Spirit here at home as well. But we need our students. They need to experience the power and the presence of God themselves. Mission trips are a great place for that to happen. Next of all, they need to experience miracles, and I mean that. You know, as I was doing some research and some study, I ran across someone who was very adamant about this and said the reason this generation is leaving the church and not interested in the church at all is because they do not believe that miracles happen in the church any longer. Wow. What an indictment on the church. But it is not true. God is still performing miracles. And we have seen miracles in our camps. We've seen them happen. We've seen eyes open. We've seen ears open. We have seen, you know, legs that were broken, and we see kids walking on them. It's been an incredible moment. But I've also experienced powerful miracles while on mission trips with a bunch of students. How about I was in Bolivia when this lady had curvature of the spine so bad that she was doubled over. And the only way she could see when she walked is she had to walk backwards because her head literally was tucked between her legs, and that's how she walked. And I remember kids getting around her and praying and believing God for miracles, and watch this woman begin doing loops around that field. It was an Acts 3 moment. You know, she was jumping and leaping and praising God. It was a wonderful moment. Or how about the pastor preaching in his little barrio with his, right across the street was a bar and a Bravo, and we're preaching the gospel, and this pastor had paralyzed vocal cords. He could not speak, but yet I heard in perfect English as he was praying in the Spirit. I heard in perfect English, and this man knew not a word of English. I heard him pray in the Spirit, Lord, heal my throat. Lord, heal my throat. And this man continued to pray in the Spirit, and he was tenacious. And we watched that night as God miraculously healed that pastor's vocal cord. He had that mic, and he was praising God in that mic. He was leading the people. It was a powerful moment. Or how about the miracle of salvation? When I was in El Salvador, I watched as we went to a field where there was displaced people because of the mudslides, and we brought them food, and I watched this 90-year-old man walk up holding a bag of groceries in his hand. But he came forward for salvation. He needed to know the Lord who cared about him and his people. And I watched this 90-year-old prune man just give his life to Jesus. It was a miraculous moment. You know what? We need to take and have these moments. But you know what, Lee? Before we go any further, you know what? We've got some things, man, we want to do that we do as a tradition in the Buildcast. What are some of those, Lee?
Well, we've got some great giveaways today, as always. And one of those giveaways I have here somewhere, unless somebody stole it or I lost it. There it is. I lost it.
I got
Wasn't
it for
stolen.
you.
Wasn't stolen. Starbucks gift card. All right. And this is, of course, valuable for all your things. I know we've got a lot of youth pastors out there who have the taste of junior high girls when it comes to Starbucks with your vanilla, sweet cream, cold brew, whatever's.
Come on.
So, but this is valuable.
Delicious.
So, as you noticed,
So
we had a last-minute shift. Google changed some things on our end, so you noticed that we have a different interface this time if you're one of our regular viewers. You can ask questions today in the comments section there on the YouTube page. If you're part of the Pendel Youth Pastors private group, you can post some questions in there as well for the Buildcast. We're monitoring both of those here, and we apologize for that shift in format, but we're going to always give away these gift card for the best and most active participants. So we want both quantity of participation and quality. All right, don't ask. There's some people say there's no such thing as dumb questions. There really are. So ask us some good questions, but ask a lot of questions, and we'd appreciate that. So that would be great. And just chat into any one of those two things. We want to just mention as well, Youth Advance is just around the corner. What if, we're just dreaming this year with Youth Advance, what if God did some amazing, amazing things in your schools this year that are represented in your youth ministry? What if this year was different? What if this year the Holy Spirit began to do things on an even bigger level than He's already been doing? And, if you haven't signed up yet for Youth Advance, please do that. Maybe you missed out on promoting this, you're busy with fine arts, or just coming back from the rush of the summer. Man, just grab a few key students and bring them. Really, Youth Advance is for just about anyone it's for anybody who calls themselves a committed follower of Jesus Christ. It's all about missional discipleship, and it's our premier missional discipleship event that we have. So I want to encourage you to be a part of that. So, well, we're getting on to our time frame here, and I know we have great guests here, Doug, so why don't you take back over and tell us about Dave?
Thank you, Lee. I appreciate that. Hey, Lee, you're going to come back and you're going to be talking to us for just a couple of moments here, setting up a framework for missions. And so, as we are prepping for that right now, I just want you to know, Lee, I appreciate what you do in leading so many hundreds of students. And we've got over 1,200 students right now that are on the campus even today, starting this first week of school and taking Jesus to their schools. But Lee, talk to us about a framework of missions.
Yeah, when it comes to missions and setting up a framework, I think it's really tied to the philosophy that we find of youth ministry, of equipping others. And, of course, I think all of us recognize Great Commission moments, that we're called to make disciples of all peoples, all nations, everywhere we go. Sometimes we even get, of course, hyper-focused on where we're called to now. And that is certainly appropriate, but I would encourage you to consider that our discipleship of students, our discipleship of families in the church is not just about what is happening immediately in their surroundings and in their world, but it is about helping them to develop a global heart. And what happens overseas, honestly, when you do a missions trip, when you're in youth ministry, wherever it is that you choose to go overseas, that has great implications for what happens at home as well, in terms of student discipleship and outcomes. Maybe you're in a youth ministry, for example, that you've tried really hard to get students to share their faith at school, to invite friends and things like that, and it's just not happening. Sometimes a cross-cultural experience can really serve, number one, to shock students out of their comfort level of being at home and where they are. They get stale, they get comfortable, they get a sense of peace, but they lose their sense of a need for Jesus and for the Holy Spirit. Sometimes being in a foreign culture can really help to kind of shock them out of that. And so that's one thing. But the other thing we've seen really frequently with students in terms of missional discipleship and mission trips is when they get into those overseas moments and they're having to go door to door, to pray with people or invite people to places, and they're having to approach people on the street, things maybe that they've never done. What that really does, of course, it puts them in uncomfortable positions, but it begins to build their confidence. Yeah, we can do this. And as a youth leader, one of the things you've got to do then is take and link those moments where they're being pushed beyond their comfort zone, where they're being pushed into missional things, where they're being pushed into dependence upon the Holy Spirit. Then you've got to help them bring that home. You've got to help them translate that back. And so I think every good youth ministry needs to consider being a part of an overseas missions trip. Now, when it comes to all things youth ministry, I know we've got viewers from medium-sized churches. We've got volunteers here today. We've got youth pastors who have no budget. They are the youth budget, just the fact that they exist as a role in the church. We've got viewers from mega churches who have a lot of resources. All things considered, missions trips has got to be part of your kind of stewardship plan of time and money and energy in your youth ministry. And so I think it's one that's really valuable. I know when I was a youth pastor in Carlisle, we were doing I came into a culture, we were doing National Fine Arts every year in that church, and we really began to get the heart to do missions trips, and parents were and we were doing a lot of fundraising, and we'll talk about that a little later. But I remember in a parent meeting, parents saying very sincerely, we love what you're doing, but could we do just one big trip? And could we do it every other year? Because the time of fundraising and all this is really killing us. And given the stewardship that we have to have over the resources we're given, we made a choice then to stop going to the National Fine Arts and to start doing foreign mission trips, because they both tended to carry a very similar price tag, but we were just seeing far higher spiritual returns off the mission trips. Now, for some of you, you don't have to choose. You've got enough resources in your church to make both of those things happen, and I think you should. But for some of you, it's a matter of stewardship in terms of time, energy, resources, but also stewardship of biblical discipleship outcomes. Which of all the different things that you could choose from that have big price tags are going to give you the best outcomes in terms of spiritual development, missional development, internal development, external development? I think overseas mission trips win pretty much every time. And so you need to really consider this. It'll help not just boost the awareness of God's mission in the world, but also it's tremendous to develop your students' inner being for a missional outlook on life.
That's good, Lee. You know, when I'm listening to what you're saying, it really comes down to, as a youth pastor, is do you have a ministry plan? Have you put a ministry plan in place? But that's a whole other Buildcast. We've actually talked about that. You know, we're also glad to have such a good friend of ours joining us today as a full-time, fully appointed missionary in Guatemala. Dave and Debbie Amsler, in 2006, they were appointed as missionaries to Latin America, and their call is to reach youth and train leaders and plant youth ministries and touch hurting young people with the gospel. And they've got a ministry called One Way, and we've been with them many, many times and going to the schools and presenting the gospel, and it is a phenomenal, phenomenal ministry and so effective in so many ways. You know, as we see that. Here's one of the other things that's incredible as well, is not only is he an ordained minister, but he and his wife Debbie are both general presbyters in Guatemala as well. And Debbie is the only, I believe this is right, Dave, she's the only ordained woman in Guatemala. And they don't recognize women in ministry and give them that kind of honor. But not only is Debbie the only ordained minister that's a wonderful woman of God, but they've also made her a general presbyter. Wow. Debbie moves mountains. We know that's a God thing as well. But I love you because you are so in so many ways so practical in your approach, but yet so supernaturally anointed, and we see the power and the presence of God really transforming lives. And so I've asked you to come to talk to us today, Dave. If you could just get us started from a missionary's perspective, and is one of the things that I want all of our youth pastors to catch is when you do missions, remember, we don't have an agenda as a youth pastor. We do not. When we go on a missions trip, we have not an agenda. We're there to serve that missionary. It's that missionary's agenda that we're there to serve. And so if you've got your own agenda and you know what, don't go work with Brother Dave at least, because that won't work. Yeah, we want to go as servants, not with people with agenda. But talk to us today from your perspective. And by the way, now let me just say very quickly so these youth pastors understand your background. Not only you're missionary, but you were also the district youth director in Kentucky for many years. You've been a youth pastor, a children's pastor. You've done it all. You've done it all, and so you come with a vast amount of experience. But talk to us today, Dave, about what it is, before we leave home, that stateside preparation. What is helpful? What would be helpful for them to do before they land in Guatemala and meet you?
Well, thanks, Doug. Thanks for the opportunity to be part of your Buildcast. It's an honor to connect with you, and I miss you here in Guatemala. You've been a great blessing to Debbie and I and our One Way Ministries. You were one of the very first teams that we were able to host. In a lot of ways, you helped me know how to host teams. I always led teams, but to have the Pittdale District come alongside of us was a great honor for me and a great blessing. We saw some miracles happen with your teams. As you recall, one year you brought in some speed to light equipment. That's a whole other story, but that was a true miracle of God. And we were so worried about having to pay shipping costs through Delta. It ended up being zero. We was worried about paying $3,000 of import taxes. We ended up paying $2.50 of taxes. The whole thing was a miracle. God wanted that equipment here from Speed to Light. We so appreciate that much and appreciate your heart. I really enjoy having district-led teams like yours because they are far better prepared before they ever get to me. Not just in terms of dramas and things that they can do, but deeper than that. I already have my own proprietary program, as you know. I got dramas and skits and dynamics and activities that I know serve us well here in Guatemala. But deeper than that, the kids are better prepared spiritually. They're better prepared to be flexible, to buy into what we're doing. Because I'm not running a missions program. I don't host every team. In fact, I canceled a couple teams this summer because I realized after talking to some of the leaders, they weren't wanting to do anything close to what I needed them to do. So I just suggested they find another missionary to work with, because I'm not running a tourism agency to help teams find out the experience to just get a passport stamp. I got a plan for them to do when we go into the public schools and public venues. And so that kind of preparation is invaluable. Kids are prepared to give a testimony, they're prepared to be adaptable, they're prepared to serve, and that helps me. There's never been a better day to be in youth ministry, whether it's stateside or whether it's overseas. And so we are very focused on that 4-14 window, some people call it, 4 to 14 years of age, those young teenagers. That's where we're zeroing in on, and teams help me do that because they bring an excitement. When teams are prepared to love kids, because they're going to be out of their comfort zone, they got to know how to connect with people. The main task that the team is going to bring to the table for me is connecting cross-culturally with my students here. Now that's a challenge to do. Most kids don't know Spanish. They're a little intimidated by them sometimes. But when they're prepared to try, they come in and they can connect with the kids in the school. For example, when we go into a school, we get our program set up, and immediately our team starts engaging with children, with young teenagers, trying to find out what their names are, high-fiving, interacting with them. I call it a yes face. I ask teams to decide before they ever meet anybody that they already like them. It's kind of like when you go into you're lost and you go into a convenience store and you ask for directions. You try to find somebody with that pleasant yes face to use, that you know is not going to be mean to you. That's the kind of attitude I want our kids to have, our team to have when they meet people, to say, I like you. I've watched some other groups come in, other teams from the States with other groups, and they tend to come in as a group. They sit together and they're scared to engage people. Whereas the Pendel district and other district teams, those kids are available to interact with kids from the get-go. They sit with other kids. They get right in the middle of them. They high-five them. That kind of thing is invaluable because people tell me, they say, I've heard this several times, Dave, you guys got some of the best teams. I say, I know. Well, one of the reasons why they think we have the best teams is because our young people have not been afraid to engage the nationals. when you come into, for example, I ask teams to salute everybody, greet everybody. So when you come into a church, you come to a school, it's appropriate for you to go around and you give everybody a Hollywood kiss. You greet them on the cheek, or you high five them, you give them a handshake. They're not afraid. They're not afraid to meet people. That is a tremendous blessing to our one-way ministries. And so that's the first task that the people have, is connecting with them. Another way that teams can be prepared to connect is in the food. We often get invited to participate in a meal. Just this last week, we had 40 students from the New Jersey area come in, and we was out in a 100% indigenous area, and they wanted to fix some tamales for us. And the first thing that the church recognizes is that all of the students ate the tamales that they were given. Now, I check out the food to make sure it's well prepared and they're not going to die from eating it. But when you participate in those kind of things, it's valuable to us, and we get a lot of positive feedback just from how our teams connect with people and participate in eating the food. We appreciate that a lot. Something else that you can do just preparing is know the objective of your host missionary. In my case, I have an objective. I went to several places where, as a youth leader, when the missionary didn't have a clear objective for me. So I had to really pick his brain to find out how I could help them. Some missionaries don't have their own program ready, so I had to find out, why do they want me to come to their country? What am I going to be doing there? And as much as you can, know what the missionary needs from you and how you can help them. In my case, we're going to focus on children and young teenagers. And we're going to go into public venues, especially schools, because that's the open door for us. The way the country is right now, it's, for example, here in Guatemala City, it's very difficult for me to just show up in a neighborhood and park a bus and do a street presentation. They have closed communities. They have gated communities, even in areas that are rather poor. You can't just drive a bus in there. You have to have special permission from the community to even get in. So the open door ministry for children is in public schools. So far, in the last 8 years, we have never been turned down by a director to go into the public school, including we've been into several Catholic schools to present the gospel, which is another miracle in itself. And so, so our objective is to go into public schools with our own program, and we're teaching kids our own dramas, dynamics, and those kind of things. What I need the host youth leaders to do back home is preparation, is bring those kids out of that. A lot of kids don't want to be up front. Some of kids do, but I need everybody to participate. So I need them to come out of that timid zone to be ready to do our dynamics, our interactive activities, and all of those kind of things. So a lot of it has to do with attitude and of participation. Those kinds of things help us a lot. So just kind of a short review. I'm not running a missions agency. I need kids to connect, and I need kids to be ready to do whatever I need them to do.
That's good, Dave. You know, as I'm listening to you, that as a youth pastor, preparing my students to get there, the things that are important is we need cultural prep, definitely need an attitude prep, and need to hit that head on. There's no place for prima donnas. There's no room to be timid either. We need everybody to be fully engaged with big, broad smiles and welcoming handshakes, and as you put, Hollywood kisses. And the last one is there needs to be spiritual preparation as well. They need to be prayed up, and They need to be filled with the Spirit, and they need to have a discerning spirit to be able to know, what's happening. And I think one of the most important things we need to train them in preparation is we're flexible. Because one thing I've learned in missions is if there's a plan, it will still change. No matter what the plan is, it will change. And so we've got to be flexible. We've got to trust our missionary that he knows the best direction for us to go in those circumstances. Make that happen. Thanks for helping us with that. Hey, we've got a couple of questions here that we have. First one, Blake Anthony asks, what type of training resources do you recommend for students to prepare for an overseas missions trip? I want to start by saying that there are some great spirit-filled resources that are online available through AIM that you're able to get a hold of, and they will outline for you a lot of the preparation things that have that. Do any of you guys have any other ideas?
Yeah, a Youth Alive guy in Minnesota, one of the Youth Alive assistants up there named Bobby Buchanan wrote a book a couple years ago, and it's called Watermark, and it's all about taking students on short-term missions trips. Watermark, leaving a lasting stain, and in a good way, good stain, okay? But that's on Amazon, and it's written essentially for students and people going on short-term trips to help prepare, so that could be a part of your preparation. But, what I'm hearing from Dave and reminded of constantly is, the heart matters. We shouldn't expect a missions trip to fix our students. I know I shared some of the things we get out of that, but we shouldn't really expect that to fix our students who come. We should be preparing them in their hearts first on the way there, and then in some of these other practical ways going on. So,
Rob, do you have any practical ideas, just real quick?
For resources,
yes.
I would say the biggest resource for me has been actually talking to other pastors who've done trips themselves. And so, because a lot of times my questions are very specific. I love how Pastor Lee said churches are of different shapes and sizes and going through different seasons. And so for me, the greatest resource has just been picking up the phone or texting some youth pastor friends of mine that I know have done it, who have been there, and then actually asking them, do you know of any missionaries that I could call and get some advice from? So that's been the biggest resource for me, Doug.
That's awesome. Thanks, Rob. You know what? Just before Lee, you introduce our next guest that's going to be with us, hey, I want to remind you that, man, it's just crazy to believe, but we're just a few months away from our winter retreats. And this year it's going to be Avalanche. Man, everything in our path, God wants to touch. Everything. God wants to change. God wants to move things that are in the path that have been a block or a hindrance to a student. And it's going to be an awesome, awesome few weeks that we're going to have together. It's going to be the last 3 weekends in January. Why don't you make plans and preparations to join us right there at the beginning of that new year. Let your students be refreshed and ready, meant to meet the avalanche that they're going to face when they go back to school as well. Lee, why don't you introduce our next guest?
Yeah, we just heard from him a little bit, but we're glad to have Rob Gillen with us today. And Rob's more than 10-year, I think, veteran of youth ministry, and a graduate of the University of Valley Forge, twice, two-time grad for his undergrad, and also has a Master of Theology from the University of Valley Forge. But he was a youth pastor at a medium-sized church in Harrisburg First Assembly, right out of college, and was there a couple years, and then went over to Christian Life Assembly here in Camp Hill. And we've asked Rob to come in because Rob's group, they do, like on average, about 3 missions trips every summer. So there's a lot of moving pieces to that and a lot of logistical considerations. And we've asked Rob to comment a little bit on what are some of those logistical considerations? How do we need to, how do we put a trip together, things like that. And, Rob, anytime we're talking about taking minors overseas, this is a big deal.
Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about some of those logistical things.
Yeah, I just want to, first of all, just say thanks for having me on the show, Pastor Doug and Pastor Lee, and just Buildcast is so very beneficial to me and a bunch of my friends I know that watch and tune in. And so introduce myself, as Pastor Lee said, I was at a medium-sized church. I have a couple badges of honor, guys, that I want to just point out. I'm at a fairly large church right now, and a lot of people know that about me, but what you may not know is that I was in ministry for 7 years at a medium-sized church, and my second week of youth ministry, we had our service and no students showed up.
Wow.
How many pastors you know can say that? I had 0 students that night at youth. I just feel the wave of encouragement sweeping over me.
Wow.
The effortless affirmation. No, and here's the kicker. I had 10 adult leaders, and so me and my 10 leaders gathered together with my 0 students that night, and it turned into a really great leaders meeting where we were planning on how to reach students because we had none, and then insult to injury, a girl walked in 10 minutes late. And so she was the only student to show up with 10 adults. And so we decided to include her in the leadership meeting and had, you're at the seat of honor. You get to give us ideas of how we can reach any teenagers for Jesus. And so that was a dark season. I remember that night my wife and I were talking after youth group, and she said, "Babe, are you sure we're supposed to be in youth ministry?" That's another badge of honor I get to wear when when your wife says, "Are you sure we're supposed to be doing this?" Because we're not very good at it.
By the way, I think Rob and Job both have the same number of letters.
It's true. It's true. Those were good days. And so, but God obviously, taught us a lot in that season, and we've seen incredible growth in that ministry. We were reaching over 100 students 7 years later, and that was clearly a tribute to the faithfulness of God
Praise
in our ministry. And so, long story short, I gave that introduction just to say that we've been a part of all kinds of unique mission scenarios with all kinds of different groups. And so I've had the privilege to take in teams to Detroit and to Binghamton, and we're sending now middle schoolers to the Atlanta Dream Center. This coming year, as you know, Nationals is going to be in California. We're going to be taking groups 5 days early and doing ministry in downtown LA. And we also do Central America trips and overseas trips. And so I've seen a whole bunch of different things. And my goal is to share some tips with you that might be able to help you out no matter what scenario you're in, and also share some embarrassing horror stories to brighten your day this morning. And so the first thing I want to say is that we are privileged at our church right now to be able to take so many trips and be able to give to missions faithfully because of our leadership. Our lead pastor, Pastor Shane Wilson, has a tremendous heart for missions. Last year our church had the privilege of giving almost $1 million to missions, and that has everything to do with his heart for our leadership and for a rich heritage at Christian Life Assembly of being not only interested but involved with action in missions. And so that's what overflows into everything we believe and buy into with missions. And that has so much to do with the heritage in our youth ministry as well. We've had pastors like Jeff Davidson, Tony Sebastian, Pastor Jamie Chose was a youth pastor at CLA at one time, Pastor Randy Don Giovanni was a youth pastor at one time, and also Pastor Doug Sayers was a youth pastor back in the day at Christian Life Assembly. And so what I'm participating in right now at CLA is actually just a heritage of missions at our church. And so some basic logistics about missions. I want to tell you a story. We were taking an overseas trip. It was one of my first overseas missions trips. And we were getting ready, and so I decided to get some counsel about when I should show up at the airport. I didn't call one of my friends who's done missions. I didn't call a missionary. I called the airport. And said, "Hey, when should I show up? I have a big group, and it's an early morning flight." And so the airport worker said, "You know what? You don't really have to show up too early. Don't show up too early because honestly, it's early in the morning, and the gates don't open." So I literally listened to the first person that picked up the phone. It was probably like
the janitor.
Exactly. Or someone who's been working there for less than a week, And so I'm thinking, all right, great. So I'll show up like an hour early, maybe, and and we'll hop on the flight, and this is going to be amazing. And so I had my students show up about 2 hours early, and we took our time getting to the airport because we have to get there early. And so we prayed in the parking lot and had a really good time, let the parents take time really just, encouraging their students. Then we got to the airport. I walked to the front, check-in, and I told them, hey, we're here for this flight, and the gentleman looked at me and said, sir, there's no way you're going to make that flight. I don't even need to start checking you in. You can just pack it up. And I turned around to a group of 20 students and 7 leaders, completely humiliated, as I'm telling them that we're not going to make the flight on the first day of our missions trip. And so I share that story for those of you that will ever be in that scenario for 2 reasons. 1, you will survive. You will make it. But 2, don't ever listen to anybody who hasn't done it themselves, first of all. And I would say over prepare for your trip. It's now one of our policies for any trips that I take, especially overseas. We actually show up 6 hours before we take off. And that is something that we factor in for any traffic delays, for any emergencies with students. And what we do is we build it into our budget. We actually have dinner at the airport or whatever meal that is. Really take our time before we hop on the plane. But let me hit some real quick logistics for you to help you avoid some crazy pitfalls that I've experienced and to maybe make your trip a little bit smoother. First question we ask every year. We take an average of 3 to 4 trips. This year we're taking 4. As we ask where. And the first thing we do is we pray. And I consult my lead pastor. Pastor David Richards is our family ministries pastor. He has a tremendous background in missions, as well as Kurt Harris, our director at our church. And I bring them all in. I want as many voices as possible, and we pray, God, where do you want us to go? And then the first thing that we do, and this is absolutely to do with our lead pastor, Shane Wilson. He has a huge heart for building relationships with people in missions. And so the people that we have relationships with, starting with the missionaries that we support on a monthly basis, we reach out to them. And we ask them, hey, what is God doing in your area of the world? Can we be of assistance? And sometimes this process is really smooth. We give a single call and we're there, and everything just falls in place. And sometimes it's messy and clunky, and we hit walls and close doors. And I want to encourage you, if you experience that, that's really normal. Last year we had to call about 20 different missionaries before God finally led us to the ones that we were supposed to go to. But I just want to say this, the ones that we participated with and partnered with, we had tremendous experience. And God poured out His Spirit not only on our students, but in the areas that we were serving. And we just saw some miraculous things working with refugees, pulling into countries at very timely seasons where we were able to do some amazing things and see some amazing things that God was doing that we wouldn't have experienced if God wouldn't have closed all those other doors. So that's how we decide where we're going. We reach out, we pray about it, and then we look for places where we can make long-term impact. One of the places that we've been going every single year for nearly 5 years now is with King's Castle in El Salvador. We just discovered that God really put that on our heart to make that a consistent trip for our group. And maybe there's a place that God wants to put on your place to go and be a part of. And so once we decide where we're going, we start asking how. And so we think about transportation. Many times the best flights for us in our area is Dulles. And so we'll price our flights out of Dulles, but then we have to figure out transportation to and from. We've actually built it into the cost for our trips. We actually just take a bus. There's a lot of cheap charters that will get you to the airport and back. You don't have to worry about that. You don't have to worry about having to put together vehicles. I don't know if your church vehicles are like mine, but sometimes they break down. You don't want to break down on the way to the airport. And so charter back and forth, and we also build in the cost of any kind of meals, not only on the trip, but to and from. But there's some incredible agencies out there, incredible missions programs that can actually bundle all that together for you and make it really simple. If you've never done a mission trip before, I would trips. Instead of trying to piece it together, really invest in a trip where you can be hands-off and you can just disciple your students and just be there as a shepherding voice in their life and not have to worry about them. Glean and learn. And so we ask, and then some of the things that we factor in: transportation, housing, food. We build in part of our cost of the trip is to pay for the chaperones. So we discuss, we're going to need this many, and then once we discover that, we build it into the cost. And I would say the best tip I can give you is build in a buffer. build in a buffer to the cost of your trip, because you will be surprised how many unforeseen expenses show up, especially in an overseas trip. Sometimes travel isn't what you think it's going to cost. Sometimes there's parking. Sometimes there's miscellaneous expenses that will pop up and be a part of that. And so today I just want to really encourage you that just to over prepare and to build in for any last minute expenses. And then the who, which students are going. We have an application process. As a matter of fact, this Sunday we're announcing our trips, and then within a month our students can submit applications. A month later we present interviews. Myself and several of our pastors will interview our students, not only determine whether they're ready for a trip, but which trip would be best for them. And then we do a couple simple fundraisers throughout the year. We do missions meals, missions dinners. After our services, we'll serve a meal once a month. All the proceeds go to support our students. I want to encourage you as a youth pastor, do not feel the weight of having to pay for the entire trip through fundraising. And it's a lesson that I learned in ministry, that I actually think it's good for students to have to work and to put some time and effort into assisting and paying for their trip. So for our students, we typically help them pay for about 20 to 25% of it, and then we give them sponsorship letters. We give them ideas for how to do fundraising. But just to paint a picture for those of you that may be in a large church, for us, we're taking 4 trips this year. One of them is actually partnering with our district, and they're going to be taking a phenomenal trip this year to Romania. And I reached out to Pastor Lee and just said, hey, can we tag along? And for all churches, I think this is a great opportunity. If you're a smaller church, all the legwork is done for you. They've taken on the lion's share of the effort, so you can just dive in and be a part of it. You can go with your group or just send your students. But even at a large church, what we've discovered is sometimes you need a critical mass of students to launch your trip. We need a certain amount of students to get a trip off the ground. What we've discovered with the district trips is that we can plan on making that one of our trips, and if 5 students sign up, wonderful. We're going to take 5 students with us to Romania. If 25 show up, great. But it's going to be an amazing trip no matter what, and we don't have to worry about a critical mass. So, for instance, this year we're going early to LA, we're doing the Atlanta Dream Center, we're going to El Salvador, and then Romania gets to be a bonus trip for us because we know and we can rest assured that it's going to be a phenomenal trip. We only need to provide 2 chaperones because the whole staff here is going to be going on the trip, and it makes for a really great experience for our students. So that's a little bit about how we're doing missions right now. There's a whole bunch of different ways to do it. It's an incredible privilege, like Pastor Doug said. For us, discipleship is what it's all about. I cannot name anything that we do that does not have a more profound effect on a student than a missions trip, and that's really the big reason why we do them.
Yeah, that's excellent, Rob. And if we could visit one or 2 of the questions relate to some of the things you said, and we are going to give some details
about the Romania trip in a little bit, and we appreciate you referencing that. But we had several questions regarding students coming on the trip. One of the questions was, how do you select them? You referenced the application process, which is good. Yeah, let them apply. I would encourage you to be careful about making the selection, because the Holy Spirit will speak to the students, and they'll be able to hear that better than you. So have an application process, but several questions from both Blake Anthony and Ryan Deal about turning students away. Do you turn students away? What about the student who you're not really even sure if they're a Christian, or maybe they're a new Christian? What are some of the ways you've handled that over at CLA?
That's difficult. It's difficult. And as I referenced, it's very rare that we will completely turn students away from doing a missions trip, but we do a variety of missions trips, and so some students will apply maybe to do an overseas trip with us when maybe they're not ready for that, but they may be ready for more of an introductory trip. And that's another reason why we have a variety of trips with the group that we have. So this year, a great example, we had some students apply to go on our overseas trip, and El Salvador for us functions much better as an introductory level trip because there's training built into it. The missionaries that we partner with, they are the triplets in El Salvador, and they have been doing it for well over 25 years, and so it's a well-oiled machine. We know that it's going to be a win. We know that the students are going to walk away with a lot of training and a really good idea of what missions is really all about. But there are some students that apply that their heart maybe isn't in the right place, or maybe there's some behaviors that you've been trekking with them through, and maybe even an introductory level trip may be a difficult decision. So it's very rare that we turn students away. A lot of times we'll say, hey, before you sign on, can we walk through something with you? And we take them through a discipleship process, and it's kind of like a probation kind of period where we're walking with them for a month or two to see.
And that's part of you, and I think that's part of the thinking, right? I mean, because we talked earlier on about training, getting your heart ready and all this, so you may not have a student who's quite there when they sign up, but you're going to send them through a filtering, a sifting process before they get on the plane.
Yeah.
And that's got to be part of the thinking.
Absolutely.
As you're talking, though, I'm hearing you say, Pastor Rob, you got an opportunity because you have multiple trips, and so you're able to direct them into an introductory. Most churches only have one option that's available to them at that particular time. And so let me talk to those pastors that have that option or don't have the multiple options to be able to do there. Yeah. And what you need to come up with is you really need to come up with an assessment tool and where you're looking for them to reach certain levels in their spiritual growth. And you know what I'm talking about when I talk about spiritual growth. You need to see servant attitude being demonstrated. You need to see people who are fully engaged and they're coming. They're interested in they're getting involved in ministry on a weekly basis. And those are the kind of things that you talk to a student about. That even as Pastor Ryan, you were asking, about is it detrimental to take a new Christian on a missions trip? Well, once again, it depends on the missions trip. But I will tell you, missions trips are spiritual warfare. They are spiritual warfare, and you take a new believer who doesn't know they may not even know one verse of scripture, and you're going to take him into the enemy's camp, and it's like taking him in with no armor whatsoever. Of course, they know Jesus, but his discipleship needs to take place before. I would not recommend it. But once again, it depends on the trip that you are going on, what you're taking on. There's some trips that would be very beneficial for someone just newly coming to Christ to be a part of. But we want to grow our students to a place where they all get this kind of experience to be able to do this.
But I also want to just throw in, we're discussing this in a very linear way, like new believer leads to discipleship, leads to going on a missions trip. There's a whole discernment issue, too, with taking students on missions trips. You may have students who've been in church their whole life and are great Bible quizzers, but they're not supposed to go on a trip. And it's a spiritual thing for some reason. You may have some that are newer Christians, but they're supposed to go on a trip. So there's also just this trump card, and Rob, I think, referenced it earlier when he said it's very difficult because there is a spiritual side of this where we have to hear from the Holy Spirit. So I would caution you, think linearly about it, but be careful not to get too linear in your thinking.
Yeah, I just wanted to toss in too, just to wrap up, that I love what our missionary shared a little bit earlier, just about how important it is that when students are on these trips, that they're there to serve the missionary. That's why we go, and so it's 150% about the missionary and not about us, and that's one of the big discernment factors for us. And then last but not least, we can't overemphasize the power of prayer. We're praying through that process.
Right. It's
not just a human interview process. We're praying, and I've had students come to me before we even had to approach them and say, you know what, God convicted me. I'm not supposed to be going on this trip. We've also had circumstances play out where we have students say, you know what, this isn't going to be something I'm available to do. We had 2 or 3 students right down to the wire say, you know what, this came up and I can't be a part of this trip, and it ended up that they really wouldn't have been good for that. And so I would really emphasize the power of prayer throughout that process, that God can supernaturally direct students and then even direct you to certain students.
Thanks, guys. Hey, Dave, time is just flying by here really fast, and I want us to get to your second set, and that is on the cross-cultural experience, talking about painting pictures for students so they go home with the stories that need to be told there. But why don't you just jump right in there, and we're going to try to redeem some time here.
Well,
You're
I
muted,
appreciate
Mike.
everything. Appreciate everything everybody's saying. The preparation you guys go to help come alongside of a missionary, and that's so important because leadership is the key for me. Overseas here in Guatemala, at least, leadership is a little more highly respected. And so I need to be able to connect with the host leader, the team leader. I can't afford to have 10 leaders, 10 bosses deciding what's going on. I need the team leader to be in charge of his team with me, and together we'll make some important decisions. If I have problems on a team, it often will come from a non-youth pastor, a mother on the trip who suddenly thinks that she's in charge. Culturally, that can kill me because people are looking for me to be the leader as a missionary, and they're looking for that host leader. They respect them as a pastor, and when there's somebody else undercutting that, it's horrible. And so so culturally, that is an important. Leadership is important. That flow of leadership is really going to help. Culturally, I want our kids. I say our kids, your young people that come on the trip. I still claim the American youth. When I walked out of my office in Kentucky, I wept when I closed the door, knowing that I was going to have to leave that part of youth ministry behind. I don't feel like I'm doing much different. I'm just doing it in another place, in another language. And when the young people come, I want to give them a very positive experience that's going to connect here in Guatemala. One of the things that they bring to the table is a passion for God and an excitement. A group of American students is going to have attention. That's one reason why I host teams. I can get into schools easier if I have an international team. And that enthusiasm is important. And if they can be prepared with giving a testimony, I needed them to have their testimony. I need to get it right, get it hot, and get it out. If they're going to read their testimony, it's not going to connect. They need to know their own story. If they don't know their own story, they don't need to be telling their, they don't need to be speaking too much. Let me just tell you what I saw last week with a group of young people. We had a team of 40 students. That's a pretty good sized team to get everybody participating. But the team was able to participate whether or not they were on the platform. The students that were in the crowd of 300 teenagers felt as engaged as those that were up front leading the choreographs and the dramas and those kind of things. And when it came down to the altar experience, we're in a public school and we're challenging those teenagers to give their life for Christ. We were in a 100% indigenous community where Spanish is actually their second language. They tend to be a little bit timid. They feel a little overwhelmed with 40 teenagers from the United States being there. Sometimes they struggle with self-image problems. They see American TV and they think all American students are cool or rich and all kinds of other things. And so they're a little intimidated, and we come to the altar response, and you could feel the peer pressure there. We could see students beginning to tear up, wanting to respond to the gospel, but there's only a few kids that would raise their hands for that altar invitation. And at that moment, I saw 40 students from the New Jersey area begin to just go invade the crowd. That's a good term. They just went without fear and begin to put their arms around kids and pray for them. Most of the students at the school didn't even know what they were saying, but I watched teenagers begin to weep in a public school with kids, and they just begin to get teenagers in little groups of circle, and and in a few moments' time, I saw 300 high school students in small groups weeping in the presence of God. I felt like I was at church camp. As American students just begin to engage other kids with the love of God. And in some ways, that's a cross-cultural experience. It wasn't a cultural expectation from those students in that indigenous school. They weren't ready for that invasion. There's times to be very culturally sensitive, and there's times that God sends us to go cross-culture a little bit. I don't know if that's the best term, but maybe counterculture is a better term, as they begin to challenge those high school students to receive Christ. And it was a move of God. The principal of that school has asked us personally to please come back to that school to engage their students. That has never been done in that community before. And I need our students to be culturally sensitive and be ready to engage students, of course. So that's one of the things that we do. I need kids with a passion for God who will participate, but I need them to realize that the participation of ministry is not just in front of people. Ministry is 100% of the time. It's in the hotel. It's in the restaurants. It's in the market. Just last week, the owner of the Tikal Futura, which is a 5-star hotel that God has given us an incredible rate. I apologize to our groups because it's too nice of a hotel for our missions team. Usually the first night and last night, they're going to stay at that hotel because it's safe, it's secure, they got parking, and they give me such a ridiculous rate, I can't match it anywhere in the city. The owner of that hotel took Debbie aside to thank her for how well our teams treat their staff. Their staff told the owner of the hotel that of all the teams, of all the people that come through, that our teams treat their staff better than anybody. And the owner of the hotel knows us by name. I didn't even know she knew who it was. That's because our teams have done what we asked them to do, is to represent Christ when they're in performance and when they're not performing. Ministry is 100% of the time. And I wish I could tell you all the stories that happened because teams have helped me represent Christ in the hotel, in restaurants, and in the market. Yeah, then when we get to the public school, we have power to present Christ because they've already been living it throughout the week.
Thank you, Dave. Our time has run out here really, really fast there, and there's so much that we want to hit. There's a bunch of questions here that we've gotten, and I apologize we weren't able to get to all of them. We'll take, and we will hit these at the end of this Buildcast. Lee, why don't you talk to us about that upcoming? I know that Rob, you said you're joining us, but talk to us about the trip that we're planning to Romania.
Yeah, we're looking forward to next summer, about 11 months from now, actually. July 10th through the 18th are very firmly for our AIM trip. We're going to be going to Romania, to Vanessa in Romania, and for those of you who are participating here in the Pendle District, you'll know the names Mike and Anna Descalescu. They are District Missions Project this year. They were itinerating just a few years ago. And we're going to be teaming up with them at the Vanessa Community Center in Vanessa, Romania next year. We're going to be working with them to do a number of different day camps depending on the participation we get from you guys as youth pastors, as leaders. For the younger students, we'll do VBS. For the older students, we're thinking if we could put together some sports camps, volleyball, soccer, basketball are huge over there. And what we're really are wanting is a great participation from the district. So we want to invite you as youth pastors to consider making this a part of 2017. And we will have joint trainings together here in the central Pennsylvania area, but also you'll be able to have training times on your own, preparing different dramas, human videos, things. Maybe you've got students in your group who are talented in athletics or in children's ministry, building that as part of your team, getting them involved. So you get to lead this trip on your end. We take care of all the details. We're your travel agent. We'll get you there. We've made all the connections. And we have the information live now at PendleYouth.com. PendleYouth.com, and I think it's PendleYouth.com/aim. It's really simple. PendleYouth.com/aim, and we have some of the information up there. Scroll on down. We've got both adult and student applications there for you to check out and download. The cost of this trip, $2,400. And anytime you're planning a missions trip, 2 words you want to use: 1, non-refundable; 2, tentative. Okay. So our tentative cost is $2,400. We think that's very close to where it's going to be, if not that exact number. Sometimes taxes can change, and sometimes airlines change their fees last minute, and those kind of things we can't really negotiate on. But we're thinking $2,400. Start fundraising now. Start getting a plan together for that now. Get the applications. Join us. I'd be happy to meet with you, talk with you about the trip, how your team could play a role. But as we talk about missions trips, there's just so many variables to consider. Think about coming with us. We'll take care of the details, and you get to focus on your students and on the ministry. So we appreciate you considering making that a part of your plan. We're looking forward to having Rob and a group of students from CLA with us as well. So it's going to be a great, great time next summer as we hit up Eastern Europe.
In close, hey, I want to say thanks to everybody for joining us. Thank you, Dave, for joining us all the way from Guatemala. Give Debbie a hug for us, not a Hollywood kiss, but give her a good one for us. And we love you guys, and thanks for what you're doing to reach a country with the gospel of Jesus Christ. It's always an honor to partner with you, and we look forward to those next moments. Let me just say to you, youth pastors, you would do very well if you can get a missions team in with Dave and Debbie Emsla. They're terrific hosts and leaders, and God has given them a plan. You will do something significant for Jesus being with them. I want to say thanks to Pastor Rob for being with us and joining us today and being a part of that. Of course, always my partner in crime, Lee Rogers, and in ministry. Yeah, I love this man and appreciate that. And all the team is working behind the scenes as well, Mark and Jessica and everyone else. We appreciate you. Our next Buildcast is going to be October the 27th. And our next Buildcast is actually building a youth ministry budget. How many of you are already concerned about the budget you got to submit? But building a youth ministry budget, how to create income streams for your youth ministry. So we'll be talking about that. And by the way, Dave, you'd probably be good for that too, because you're one of the most entrepreneurial guys that I know. This is a guy when a volcano, happens in Guatemala, he goes up and shovels all the ash into big bags, and then he brings it on down, and they put it in little bottles and sell it to us suckers who are coming in for $5 a bottle. And let it rain. He is one of the. I'm telling you,
it's for the gospel.
It's all for the gospel. That's right. So I've got several bottles of ash that I bought too. I'm one of the suckers. But thanks for joining us. Hey, Lee. We've got a giveaway here.
We got a giveaway, and you guys were furious with the questions today.
Yes, you were.
Really great stuff. Our top question askers, Ryan Deal, Ryan Kuhn, and Blake Anthony. And I think we're going to end up giving this to Ryan Deal, one of the football goons. Ryan, appreciate you making time in your busy schedule. And we're going to send this out to you as well, but really fantastic. I wish I could give a card to everyone.
Really?
But because there were some great questions. So thanks for the participation, and we know you guys are busy, youth ministry professionals and husbands and wives and parents as well, so thank you for your time.
One of two things are going to happen at the close. If we're able to take and answer each of your questions after this Buildcast and put them online, we'll do it. Otherwise, we'll take and answer them and we'll put them in our Facebook group. One way or another, we're going to do our best to answer all the questions that you send in. So if you didn't give the answer, we got it for you. Hey, appreciate all of you. God bless you. Have a super day, a super rest of your summer. Hope to see you at the Back to School Advance. It's going to be an awesome day. God bless you.
Thanks, Doug. See you guys.
Hey, thanks, Dave. Appreciate the time.
Are we blacked out, Mark?